Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and folks that will join us later, we'll just bring them along with where we are. So my name is Sarah Scruggs. I'm the education coordinator at the Northern California Land Trust, and really excited to have you all here with us this morning for the first workshop of our fall series. And this environmental justice and practice workshop focused on the indoor environment came out of discussions that we are having with residents at the Northern California Land Trust that are looking at what it means to make their buildings more energy efficient, and how they can afford that, and why, with the myriad of other things that are competing issues in their lives, they should care about it. What difference does it make for them and the community at large? So we're really excited to have you here this morning to talk about this important topic, and I'll introduce workshop presenters and facilitators later on. And just also want to start with a land acknowledgement. Here, Northern California Land Trust is located in the East Bay on unceded Chochenye Ohlone territory. And so we didn't want to just recognize that this morning, but also talk about the efforts of the Ohlone people now on this land. The Segorite Land Trust has been set up and is led by urban Indigenous Ohlone women to facilitate the return of Indigenous land to Indigenous people through various practices, and then heal and transform the legacies of violence here, and to do the work that they believe their ancestors and future generations are calling them to do. And so, in addition to recognizing whose land we are on today, want to also encourage people, if you're in this area, to learn about the Segorite Land Trust and consider paying the voluntary land tax as an action towards recognizing whose land we are on today. And then if you are from different areas of the United States, Turtle Island, and other areas around the world, to also do the work that you can do to figure out whose land you are on, if you don't know already, and then ways you can support work that's being done today. Okay, so a little bit more about the Community Co-Ownership Initiative. It grew out of a partnership between the People of Color Sustainable Housing Network and the Northern California Land Trust, with a focus of providing training and resources that would support Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income led housing land and projects. And the rest of our series is open for people to register for. We have a second part of this series, Environmental Justice and Practice, focused on the outdoor environment that'll be happening in November. And then something that's focused on mental health and wellness in December. And all of these topics have come out of issues that NCLT residents, staff, board, and partner organizations are thinking about and grappling with. And I know all of us have been through a lot in the pandemic over the last year and a half. And so that's one reason that we wanted to have something that was focused on wellness, just because of everything that people have been talking about that they've been dealing with for themselves individually, and then also trying to stay and live in community in healthy ways. And then today's agenda. So I'm just going to set up why we really care about this issue and connecting permanently affordable housing to the impacts of climate change, and then pass it on to Veena Singla from the National Resources Defense Council for framing about this issue, looking at health, buildings, and resiliency, and then the disparate impact of some of the issues that we're talking about on different communities. And then we'll have a brief break, and then we'll pass it over to Chris Hunter from Stop Waste to focus on practices for your home and to create efficiency and resiliency. And then, the focus today will be on programs that are available in the Bay Area to make that possible. But I'm sure that there are resources wherever you are from that you could probably tap into. And then we'll go ahead and close. And we encourage people to ask questions throughout in the chat, and we'll take questions and answers at the end of every section. And look at all these people flowing in. Hello, hello, Arlene. And then we'll also have some time for discussion. And since we're a small group, we'll probably just do it all together. Okay, so just real quick, this is a representation of how a community land trust functions. So you have the land, which is owned by the community land trust that's governed by residents, community members, and people that have different expertise. And then the residents have control of the structures that are on top of their homes with different types of ownership and different types of resident management. And it's that 99-year ground lease that's the mechanism that creates permanent affordability so that the housing is actually available for future generations to be able to afford it. And it doesn't increase just by the whims of the market, but increases by different indexes like increases in income or increases in the consumer price index. And, having that housing as a resource for future generations is directly impacted by man-made climate change, by the CO2 emissions and different things that we and our systems emit into the air that then make the earth a lot hotter, that then impact us having more frequent and intense wildfires. Thankfully, at least here in the Bay Area, we haven't dealt with as much this wildfire season, but who knows what's to come. And then also impacts our health in our homes where we actually live. And so the homes and the resources for future generations that we're committed to creating through the Land Trust will only be around and be an available resource if we adapt and create systems and energy efficiency that will allow this to be a resource, a sustainable resource into the future. And I'm going to go ahead and let my colleague Diana Sachs just say a brief word about the work that she does in the Land Trust on this topic before we pass it along to Veena.
Everybody, my name is Diana Sachs, and I'm the Sustainability and Asset Manager for the Northern California Land Trust. I've been with NCLT for almost a year now, and it's been really exciting working within this model and energy efficiency because, as Sarah was saying, there's just so much interconnection between the two. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. NCLT is currently working to decarbonize our buildings. So we want to remove some of the harmful gas equipment that we have in a lot of our residences and install energy efficiency appliances, which will lower utility bills and also create a much more safe environment for residents. So we're really excited to have this conversation today and to have partnerships with people like Stop Waste and Spark and the Nrdc, which are great organizations working in the Bay Area for these same issues. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Diana. Welcome everyone who's come. We just did a brief intro. If you all want to put your name in the chat, where you're connecting from and what drew you to this workshop today, that'd be great. I'm going to pass it off to Veena.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Diana, and I'm going to share some slides I have. One moment, please. Let me pull those up. Great. Well, thank you so much to Northern California Land Trust for organizing this important workshop. And I'm really delighted to be here to speak with you today about this topic. So the plan for what I'll talk about is I'll tell you a little bit about the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, and the organization's work and what I do, and then talk a bit more about how buildings contribute to major disparities in climate impacts, energy bills, and health outcomes, and then outline a framework for solutions that really address these intersecting issues, taking a holistic look at climate, energy, and health. So a little bit more about NRDC. We're an international nonprofit that employs scientists, lawyers, and policy experts to advocate for evidence-based policies to protect human health and the environment. And we have a staff of about 700 and offices across the US, from New York to DC and Chicago and San Francisco, where I am, and also in Beijing, China. And we work on a range of critical issues, climate change, energy, nature, food. And I'm a scientist that works at the science policy intersection, really focused on this issue of healthier communities. And I do research and analysis to bring the most current scientific principles and data to inform policies to advance healthier buildings and healthier homes, especially thinking about disinvested communities who face the largest health disparities. And the goal of my work is really to advance health equity. So that's the idea of health equity, is that everyone has the opportunity to achieve their highest level of health. So before I get a little bit more into talking about buildings, climate change, health, and energy, we'd love to hear from you around what are your biggest concerns when it comes to climate change, health, energy, and your home. And I'll turn it to Sarah to facilitate this part.
Yeah, and since we're still a smaller group, I would just encourage folks to either put your biggest concerns around these issues in the chat, or to just unmute yourself and speak. So Chris has put in the chat, indoor air quality, power shutoffs, and then Smith, you raised your hand. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. My name is Smith. I'm joining from Nigeria, and it's already 7 p.m. here. Okay, so my screen is not clear. I can't see the question properly. But for me, I think we have challenge in Nigeria, here in Port Harcourt precisely, what we call the black suit. So it's a very serious climate change situation here that even the government is not paying attention to that. The multinationals are not paying attention to that. So myself, I've been able to take it as a responsibility, to champion like an awareness walk. That was 2 weeks ago on 24th September. We had an awareness walk, where we had to engage stakeholders about our concerning that black suit, because the health implication is enormous. People are dying out of it. It could cause cancer. It could cause a lot of things because of emission, pollution, consistent pollution. in the city here. So it's a terrible situation. So I've been able to do certain work, awareness work. I had to engage students from some of the universities, in Port Harcourt, engage some CSOs, civil society organizations, NGOs, and young people, so that we can keep creating awareness and talk about it. So we are looking forward to having maybe a similar work on the 29th of October to engage the government. So we are going to Government House, and talk about this issue. So this is the area of my concern in terms of climate change. So we are faced with black soot. That is the challenge of this year. So we are asking them to stop the black soot here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Smith, and thank you for the work that you're doing to raise awareness and get people involved and try to move the government to pay attention to and put resources towards dealing with what you guys are facing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Other folks have put in the chat, increasing extreme weather events around the world, pollution that causes lung problems, not only to humans, but other organisms. And hi, Liat. Vallejo's climate policy hasn't been updated in over 10 years. We have an entire waterfront that will be impacted by sea level rise, and the environment is impacted not only by pollution from refineries, but now the wildfire smoke. And then Arlene, need for non-toxic unscented cleaning and laundry products. For example, dryer vent exhaust is often an air pollution source. So yeah, there's lots of concern around obviously pollution and wildfires and health issues that affect us where we live and in different places, and the need for policy in order to deal with the impacts of all these things. Thank you everyone for sharing, and I'll go ahead and pass it back to Veena.
Yes, thanks so much for sharing it, and hopefully in this discussion and some of the information I'll present, we can start to get towards how there's some solutions related to our homes, the places where we live, that can start to address some of these really major concerns and issues. So buildings are the places where we live, learn, work and play, and they have big impacts on our lives in many different ways. So in thinking about climate change, building operations, including burning fossil fuels in buildings for space heating, water heating, and cooking, are major contributors to climate warming emissions. So building operations are a major factor that's driving climate change in terms of burning fossil fuels and the energy that buildings use. Building energy use also hits all of us in our wallets when it comes to high energy bills, and those high bills really hurt those who can least afford it the most, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And in developed countries like the US, we spend upwards of 90% of our times inside, and I'll speak personally, since the pandemic, it's closer to 100%, so some days. So the quality of our indoor environment, what's there in terms of the air pollution from inside sources like our gas stoves or products we may be using in our homes. So someone mentioned cleaning products, and also what comes inside from the outside, like wildfire smoke. That makes a big difference to our health, whether we're talking about inside our homes, at school, in the office, or at the gym. So the impacts of each one of these issues, climate change, energy bills, and the indoor environment, those impacts aren't even across the population. So we see big differences when we look at race and income. So thinking about climate change impacts and health, what we see in this recent report from the US Environmental Protection Agency, their analysis found that socially vulnerable populations will be hit the hardest by the impacts of climate change. So here we're looking at two specific health outcomes. The first one is PM 2.5 childhood asthma diagnosis. So that relates to particulate matter, air pollution, and raising the risk for childhood asthma. The second outcome is extreme temperature mortality. So deaths caused by extremely high or extremely low temperatures. And what we can see, and we're looking at low income or Black and African American populations, and whether people live in areas with these projected impacts. So higher air pollution leading to more childhood asthma, or more extreme temperature events leading to deaths. And we can see okay, there we go. So we see these similar trends with when we think about energy burden. So energy burden means the percent of someone's household income that's spent on energy costs. And looking across the US in major cities, what we see is that low-income people pay a much higher percentage of their income for energy, and that Black people, low-income people living in multifamily buildings, Latino people and renters also have these higher energy burdens. And what this means is when you're paying more of your income for energy costs, it's not available for other really important expenses like food, like medical care, and people have to choose between paying their energy bills, keeping the power and water on, and these other critical expenses in their lives. And what we also see is that the physical condition of the buildings where people live are major drivers of these high energy burdens. So when people have old, inefficient appliances, when the building doesn't have good insulation or air sealing, so it's really leaky, right? Air can come in from the outside. It's really hard to keep the temperature inside at a comfortable temperature because there's a lack of insulation. The building may be in poor condition. These are big contributing factors to these differences. And the condition of a building also has a really important impact on health. So we see this issue of poor housing quality really contributing to health disparities, right? These differences that we see in disease burden and outcomes across different populations. So we can see that this greater asthma burden for low income and children that are people of color. So the graph there, that first one shows the differences in the prevalence of asthma, looking at children of different races. So you can see Black children have a much higher prevalence compared to white children. We also see these differences that in terms of living in poverty, that children living in poverty have much higher asthma rates. And this is a major issue for children's health and their medical costs and being able to attend and do well in school. And what we see is that, again, the condition of our buildings and homes is part of what is driving these big differences in asthma in kids. So when we think about some of the contributing factors to asthma disparities in children, this is the circular image there on the right. We see that poverty, pollution, neighborhood conditions, violence, and housing all are contributing to these differences. And when we think about housing, it's things like mold, moisture, pests in the home, extreme temperatures, and indoor contaminants that are all contributing to these differences. So what do we need, and what do we really want to see? Well, we need these solutions that are addressing these three intersecting issues. We want solutions that operate at more than one level, not just address building climate emissions, because yes, of course that's important, but we want solutions that are going to address building climate emissions, help create more healthy and resilient buildings, and reduce energy costs for residents. And I think the good news is that with an intention, with thinking about trying to address these intersection issues, that there's building upgrades and energy retrofits that really can hit this middle sweet spot and benefit building residents' health and wallets while reducing building contribution to climate emissions that are driving these climate change and climate impacts. So I'll give kind of a couple examples of different interventions and how they can come together to address these three different issues. So we really want to think about these multiple benefit interventions, right? So here's an example of electrification. So taking appliances that are burning fossil fuels in buildings and replacing them with electric appliances. So electrification along with important building energy efficiency measures. So putting these things together, we can see this sort of multiple benefits operating on multiple levels. So replacing a gas stove in a building, we're going to reduce climate emissions because we're not burning those fossil fuels, but we're also going to reduce indoor contaminants linked to asthma. When you burn gas to cook inside, there's big spikes in unhealthy air pollutants that people can breathe in, and it's linked to increased risks of asthma in children. If we replace a furnace that's used for space heating, a gas burning furnace with an efficient heat pump, again, we're going to reduce those climate emissions, but we can also add a new service that might not have been there before. Heat pumps can provide both heating and cooling. So now we're helping to have residents adapt to more extreme temperatures, extreme heat that's coming their way. So really improving that climate resilience because we can now have cooling service, and an efficient heat pump is going to improve energy efficiency of that building and help reduce energy costs and bills. And then finally, this building enclosure, insulation, and air sealing. So putting in insulation in the walls, the roof, helping seal around windows and doors, sealing up ducts. That's going to make the building more energy efficient. So you don't have to use as much energy to heat or cool it. And that will reduce climate emissions. You can put in smaller systems, so like a smaller heat pump or a smaller ventilation system when you have this good enclosure insulation and air sealing. This insulation and air sealing, it's also going to provide big benefits for climate resilience. So you get less infiltration of stuff from the outside coming in inside. So the smoke from wildfires, the black soot that we heard from Smith about, that's gonna, not as much will come inside. So you'll have healthier indoor air during these air pollution events. And this will also help the building maintain a more consistent interior temperature during extreme weather events, extreme heat or extreme cold. It'll hold the cool air in better or keep the warm air in better. We'll also see reduced extreme indoor temperatures that are linked to causing and exacerbating asthma, especially for kids. We're going to reduce entrance and harborage for pests as well when we seal up the outside of the building. So insects, rodents won't be able to get in as well and live in the building as well. And as I mentioned, it'll improve energy efficiency. So this is an example of how we can really think about putting together building upgrades for these multiple benefits. And I just wanted to finish up with circling back to health equity and why our environment, like our homes, is so important to me. And I'd say at a basic level, when it comes to our health, there's kind of two things, right? Our genes and our environment. And we can't change our genes, at least not yet, but we can change our environment much more easily. And in doing so, we have this opportunity to lift huge burdens of disease for our most vulnerable populations like kids. So this one study looking at California estimated that if we got rid of toxic environmental exposures, we could entirely prevent 30% of childhood asthma cases, 15% of childhood cancer cases, and 10% of developmental disorders. So this is really what keeps me motivated and committed to doing this work every day. And I'd be happy to take any questions and also just hear people's kind of reflections and thoughts on the issues they raised earlier, and thinking about this approach of multiple benefits, and if there could be multiple benefits to kind of addressing and fixing issues with your home that could address those concerns. And feel free to type in the chat or just speak up, and I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other.
Yes, I have a question. If you live in an apartment building, how in the world do you get your landlord to, I guess, fix some of these issues so that it could be more environmental friendly inside your apartment home? How do we do that? Or how can that be done?
That's a great question. I have a couple thoughts on that, and I would invite Sarah, Diana, Chris, and anyone else on the call who has thoughts on that to fill in as well. I do think that programs that provide major investments and incentives for building owners to address these issues are really critical. That the bringing down the costs of replacing appliances, doing some of these energy efficiency upgrades is so important to really motivate building owners to take up some of these changes. But I'd be curious what others think.
This is going to come up during my presentation as well. I do have some thoughts. In some cases, the unfortunate reality is there's just not always a ton the renter can do. I would say from a policy perspective, it's a mix of carrots and sticks. You know, we want to, the program I work on, we provide incentives for property owners to make these upgrades and try to talk to them, get them to understand that it benefits both them and the residents, right? If you can, you know, add insulation, that improves the comfort, lowers the in-unit heating bills of the unit, but it can also lower the energy bills of the common areas and, you know, help the owner meet their bottom line, which is really to them the most important thing. But then also, I think in some cases, you know, there are more regulations and inspection programs that are needed because some landlords don't just aren't invested in upkeeping the property. During my presentation, I'm going to touch on a few, you know, solutions that people can do to improve the quality inside their units. Where do you live? Are you located in the Bay Area? Or...
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, maybe afterwards I can talk to you and let you know some programs that you could refer your landlord to. And if you have a good relationship with your landlord, then you know, maybe there are some programs available that could help them upgrade your unit.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
And then also, Sarah, I think just the CLT model in general is a really great solution to this. Sarah, maybe you can talk more about.
Well, and I just wanted to, you know, bring up what Jenny had put in the chat, which is the fact that her landlord has refused to allow for any sort of upgrades on the property. And they don't care about it because it's not their energy bill, it's the tenant who's paying for it. And that's a really hard issue to deal with. And I know, Chris, you just talked about, you know, in that case, there's going to have to be stronger policies and regulations in order to force landlords to do things that they don't want to do. But it's also a reality that we need to create more housing where residents have a say and people that own it that actually care about the health and the longevity of the residents that live there, and then also making sure that it's a resource that's available for folks in the future. And that's, you know, people that are affordable housing providers. That's part of why we're so committed to the community land trust model. And that's, I know, Jenny, that's not an immediate solution to what you're dealing with, but I know that's also why you're part of the Eden Community Land Trust, so that you can be part of creating housing that people will have a say in, and that will be affordable, and that will ultimately be healthy for them and other people in the future. And so just want to really encourage people to support long-term solutions like community land trusts that get us out of this, you know, extractive housing situation where there are certain landlords that just do whatever they want.
And I did want to comment on another issue that Jenny raised in the chat around air purifiers. I think it's I just wanted to say air purifiers do work really well to improve indoor air quality. If you want to make sure to get one with a HEPA filter, a high efficiency particulate air filter, and we have really good data that when you're using one of those, it can reduce harmful pollutants inside, even during things like wildfire smoke. So I know they can be a little bit pricey, but it is a good investment in terms of something that will work to improve your indoor air quality. And I also wanted to say there's and I think Chris will probably talk more about this. There's measures you can take yourself, like adding weather stripping around your doors and windows that will help to reduce infiltration of outdoor air as well, and are pretty easy to kind of do it yourself.
And then there's a question in the chat from Josh, and then we'll go ahead and take a break before we jump into Chris's presentation and discussion. Why do lower income families pay a higher cost in terms of energy?
Sure, I can take that one. So there's a few different factors that that contribute to that trend. I'd say a major piece is the physical condition of the buildings and appliances where lower income people live. So what we see is that oftentimes these are older buildings with deferred maintenance issues. They were built at a time when there weren't strong kind of building codes and energy codes. So they're not well insulated. They may be very leaky. They don't have great ventilation. And then they may have other issues like leaky roofs, moisture issues, and all of these things. Also with old appliances, right? Old refrigerators, old heating systems that are not very energy efficient. And these things kind of compound on each other, right? Because first you have an old heating system that doesn't work very well and it's not very energy efficient. And then the building itself isn't very well insulated and there's a lot of air leaks. So that heating system has to work even harder to try to keep that space warm. And you have to use it more and it's not energy efficient. So these things kind of build on each other to contribute to these high energy bills because the sort of physical condition of the buildings and appliances. We see that is a big factor in that difference in the energy burden.
One other thing I'll add to that, that's all definitely true. Another factor is just, even if lower income people, maybe their absolute cost of what they're paying is lower, it just turns out to be a higher share of their income. And so, a family making $200,000, that is a $200 monthly energy bill. It's going to be less burdened than a family making, $50,000 that has a $100 energy bill. So even though their energy bill is less, it's a higher share of their income.
I think that's a great point, Chris, that another part of the issue is we don't have from the utility side kind of good rate design that addresses this issue for folks. And there are programs for low income people to help with bills, but they're, I would say, just don't reach the right people. They don't have the right participation. So that's, I'd say, another big issue.
Thanks so much. And I know that we've got another question in the chat that I don't know, Smith, if we're as well equipped to answer. The best way to confront government and multinationals with respect to black soots and other emanating pollution diseases. It's a great question, and it has to do with advocacy and organizing. And I don't know if we're in a position to be able to answer that well. I don't know if anybody wants to take that up before we take like a 5-minute break.
I was just gonna offer, Smith, I don't know if you're connected with IPEN, the International Pollutant Elimination Network. They do work internationally and have coalitions and groups kind of globally. They might be a good organization to connect with to help on this issue. So I'm happy I can provide you some information to connect with them if that might be helpful.
Thank you, Vina. I'm glad you've got the international perspective. It's something on this issue that I did not have. All right. we're going to go ahead and just take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll be back for Chris to jump into some of the practices that have already been lifted up and programs, at least in the Bay Area, in order to possibly afford some of these things. Thank you. Just quick 5 minutes.
Okay, does everyone see that? Yep, great. Well, hi, my name is Chris Hunter. I am with Stop Waste. Explain who we are in just a minute. Really excited to be here, and Vina, that's a great presentation. I think covered some of the same things as me, but it's good framing, and yeah, thanks for providing all of that great info. So actually, let me get through the agenda and kind of who Stop Waste is, and then I'll introduce myself a little bit more through that, and then get into the actual presentation. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of an intro, and then hopefully expand on what Vina mentioned a little bit more, just a little bit more exploring the connections between energy efficiency and indoor air quality. And then finally, I'll get into some of the more common issues that you might come across in your home that impact both efficiency and health, and some of the solutions. And then, depending on how much time we have, I also want to share a few programs and resources that are available. These are only available to people in the Bay Area. It seems like we have a good number of folks on the call who are from outside of the region, so I might skim through that pretty quickly, but we'll see how much time we have. And then finally, hopefully we can have some time for Q&A. So, oops, sorry about that. So I work with Stop Waste. We are, for those who aren't familiar, we're a public agency serving Alameda County. It's 14 cities and 2 sanitary districts. And Alameda County is in the East Bay region of Northern California. And the easiest way I can think to describe Stop Waste is we're kind of the outward-facing sustainability arm of the county. And so as the name suggests, we were first founded and still do a lot of work around solid waste and landfill diversion. So you'll see us doing environmental education in schools, campaigns around food waste reduction, household hazardous waste. We support our cities in the county, enforce various statewide recycling and composting laws. And then finally, there's a team of 7 or 8 of us that work more on issues related to buildings and energy efficiency. So that's the team that I'm on. And within that team, a lot of our work is devoted to a group called the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, or BayREN. So BayREN is a collaboration of the 9 counties that make up the Bay Area. And the main goal of BayREN is really to help the state meet its climate goals by offering a variety of energy-saving education and incentive programs. So we offer programs for single-family homeowners, multifamily properties, small businesses, realtors, contractors, as well as local government staff. Each county kind of does outreach within their county. And so my main role at Stop Waste is to coordinate outreach for all of the BayREN programs in the county, as well as Stop Waste manages the multifamily program, which I think will be relevant to a lot of you. It's called the Bay Area Multifamily Building Enhancements Program. It's a mouthful, but we administer that program on behalf of the entire Bay Area. And so a lot of my work is working with landlords and property owners and renters and really trying to get some of these solutions implemented in multifamily properties. And then just in terms of what brings me to this work, I've been at Stop Waste for about 2 years, or a little bit under 2 years. And I'm really coming to it from perspective of climate change is, to me, just the #1 biggest issue facing us. It's what I'm really passionate about. And so that's how I come to this work. But growing up in the Bay Area and currently being a renter myself, I think anyone who's familiar with the Bay Area knows the insane housing crisis that we have going on. And so housing is also something I really care deeply about. And so I'm really excited to be able to work at something that's a little bit at the intersection of energy and housing, and especially to be connected with NCLT, who I think is doing really exciting and innovative work around those 2 things. So moving on. So before I get into specific solutions in the home, I want to spend a little bit more time expanding on Vina's session and explore a little bit more the link between energy and health, and start a little bit big picture. So I'm sure, as everyone kind of knows, inherently there's long been a dominant line of thinking in our society that environmental destruction is the cost of, economic development and human well-being. And thankfully, in recent years, there's been more of a growing shift and movement to move away from that line of thinking and acknowledge that, there's a lot of solutions that are good for the most vulnerable people at the frontline communities that also can reduce emissions and help the environment. And that's been really encouraging to see that shift. And I actually want to take it one step further and say that those two things are not actually really separate issues. And that instead, I want to kind of offer a framework of thinking of the issues at every scale, from at the household level and poverty and inequality, all the way up to the planetary issues we're facing, all in terms of health. And that a regenerative and just society is really one that centers health at every scale, starting from the individual households all the way up to the international scale, and thinking of ecosystems on our planet. Which I know sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but I want to start just with a little bit of an exercise by asking you all, what defines a healthy planet, or what are the characteristics of health on a large ecosystem or planetary scale? So feel free to just put a couple words or phrases in the chat, or unmute yourself and just shout out if you have any ideas. Not, I do have a few on the screen. Okay, see a few: clean air, clean water, food security, natural resources. See a lot of air and water coming in. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think energy is a thing, regenerative energy. I would say a circular economy is something that, kind of the lack of waste, clean land, biodiversity, maybe. Great. See a lot of good responses: healthy, conscious people, sustainable development. Cool. Yeah, I added a few here. This is obviously not a comprehensive list, but yeah, cooperation. I like that one. Yeah, really giving a people first focus. Yeah, so these are kind of, when you think of what is a healthy planet, I think these are just a few of the things that define that. And then moving one step down, is a healthy community. Our planet and our global society is made up of smaller cities and neighborhoods. And so, to you, what defines health at the community scale? Pursuit, air pollution and pollution in general, mutual aid. I like that. Access to community resources. Education. That's a good one. Give it about 10 more seconds. Community gardens, affordable homes. Yep. Less dependence on cars. Great. Yeah, you all took some of the ones I already filled in. Yeah, I mean, I think of a lot of what people said. I like mutual aid, affordable housing, access to green space, and lack of pollution. The ability to walk around and get by without a car. To me is one. Access to food. I think I saw most of these come up in the chat. And then finally, going down one more scale, is healthy homes. So at the household scale, what do you see as the things determining health? air, insulation, garbage pickup, healthy food. Yep. Love and affection. That's a good one. I don't think I had that on my slide, but I like that phrase. Affordable energy. Yep. Good ventilation. See a lot of air quality, appliances. All right. Yeah, again, a lot of the same things that I had. I think, yeah, clean air came up, you know, a lot of these responses, affordable energy, just affordability in general of your shelter, as well as the energy, energy resilience. And, you know, in the Bay Area, we have a big issue right now during wildfire season with mandatory power shutoffs to avoid, you know, the power lines catching trees on fire, essentially. And so people will just get their power shut off with little warning for up to a few days at a time. Yeah, blue ocean. And then, yeah, like someone else put not too much external noise. I personally think comfort is a huge factor of health. It's not something that we always think of, but if you're constantly too hot or too cold, or yeah, you have a lot of ambient noise, you're gonna have a hard time focusing on your work, you're gonna have a hard time sleeping, and it can really cause physical health issues. So I think that's also an important one. So hopefully this kind of gets a sense of how these things nest within each other. I could probably spend a whole hour just talking about this chart and, you know, drawing connections between a lot of these different things, but I do want to stay on topic because the focus today is on healthy homes. And really specifically focus on clean air. I know there were a lot of responses there, and Bina touched on that as well. And because you really can't talk about healthy homes without talking about indoor air pollution. So I know some of this Vina already touched on, but I do want to kind of reframe this. That indoor air pollution, as we know, is a huge issue in the homes. It's actually, not everyone knows this, but the EPA has pretty strict regulations on the acceptable levels of air pollution outdoors, but there's actually no official regulations or guidelines on how clean your air should be indoors. And so we find that often in California, the level of pollutants inside people's homes can be 2 to 5 times as high as the average level of pollutants outside. And in many cases, the indoor pollution exceeds what the EPA would deem an acceptable level of pollution. And so it's a really big issue, causes a ton of health issues, especially in children. And as Vina talked about, you know, lower income groups and racial minorities are much more, you know, likely to live in homes with high pollution. So there's 2 main ways that pollutants can get into the home. Either they can be generated from outdoor sources and then find their way into your home, or they can be generated inside the home. And so therefore, if you want to have healthy air inside your home, the 2 things you need to do is make sure you are keeping those outdoor pollutants from entering your home, and then also eliminating the sources that exist within the home. So for the external sources, I think some of the most common ones that are just throughout the year are auto exhaust and industrial uses, along with moisture and dust. That's especially if you live near a creek bed, which a lot of the East Bay has those, especially through the area around, you know, San Leandro and Hayward, and unincorporated areas have a lot of those creek beds that create moisture, and that can actually be a cause of asthma as well. And then there's also, I think as everyone in the Bay Area and really California has become aware of, is wildfire smoke becoming a much bigger issue. Sometimes for months out of the year, we're dealing with unhealthy outdoor air due to wildfires elsewhere in the state. And then finally, also pollen and allergens is a seasonal thing that can get into the home and worsen respiratory issues. And one thing I want to point out on these external sources is that to tie to that last chart I showed, in one way or the other, almost all these are tied to climate change. So things like auto exhaust and industrial uses are causes of climate change. You know, it's people burning fossil fuels that, you know, worsens climate change. And then some of them, like wildfire smoke and moisture, you know, from dry creek beds, you could say those are a result of climate change. And so hopefully that kind of starts to understand that that nesting, those nesting circles of how, what's healthy for your home is also healthy for your planet and vice versa. And then finally, internal sources. The big one that I'm going to focus on is gas burning appliances, but there's also things like cigarette smoke, mold and mildew. Someone in the chat earlier mentioned toxic cleaning supplies. And then in older homes, built in the 1950s or earlier, will often have asbestos in the insulation and other materials, as well as old carpet that can shed fibers that can worsen asthma and other respiratory issues. And just to kind of share one concrete example of this as it relates to childhood asthma, I want to share a couple of stats from the Rocky Mountain Institute. They're a think tank that does a lot of really valuable research around this. And I'm just going to read these out loud. So children in a home with a gas stove have a 24 to 42% increased risk of having asthma compared to children, in a home with an electric stove. And then studies of comprehensive energy, health, and safety retrofit programs, so this would be upgrades like I'm going to talk about in just a moment, found that for children with asthma, hospital admissions fell by nearly 85% and emergency room visits by 68% a year after the upgrade. So again, if you have kids in your home, this is really such an important thing. And like said, health is it's genes and environment. And the environment really does make a difference. If you make your home healthy, it can have a huge impact on the health of you and your family. Okay, so getting to what are the actual solutions in the home. So here in the Bay Area, we have a really wide variety of building types, sizes, and ages. Really no two homes that will have the same issues or solutions. But there are some common threads that we see across building types that can impact efficiency and health. And coming back to the health theme, a common analogy that we like to make at Bay Run is kind of thinking like your home, like your body, in that your body's made up a lot of vital systems that are all, each one is really important and works independently, but they're all interconnected. And so, for you to be healthy, you need all the systems to be working well and working cooperatively. And while there are, a lot of common diseases and health issues that affect many people, everyone is different. And so like a good doctor will recommend a personalized treatment for you rather than, just a one size fits all for every patient they have. And so finally, just similar to going to the doctor for a regular physical and how that's important even when you're not sick, it's always a good idea to think about the issues in your home and get your home assessed for any potential issues, even if you aren't aware of anything too obvious. Then at this point, and this already did come up, and I just want to address the kind of elephant in the room that'll come up during this next portion of my presentation, which is that a lot of these solutions I'm going to talk about are a little bit more pertinent to single family homes. And a lot of the solutions are not things that renters can do without permission of their landlord. I'll try to highlight some solutions that renters and people in multifamily homes can implement. But in a lot of cases, these building upgrades require either permits or large upfront capital costs that do require the property owner's approval and investment. And so in some cases, this came up, there's just not always something the renter can do. I really understand how frustrating this can be. I'm a renter myself. It's unfortunate. And so if you have a good relationship with your landlord, I really encourage you to take some of what you learned today, explain this to your landlord, maybe share the slides so they can understand the issues and how this affects you and affects them, and refer them to some resources that they can take advantage of. And then I just want to also note, BayRen, we're in the midst of redesigning a lot of our programs and rethinking this. And really, as we go through the process of redesigning our programs, one of our top priorities is figuring out how to make some of these solutions more accessible to renters. And so we're still in the kind of open feedback stage. So if you have ideas about this, if you're a renter, you have thoughts, just want to share your frustration with me, please reach out afterwards. I would love to hear any ideas or suggestions you have. So with that, there's a lot of issues that people deal with, no matter which building type you live in. Probably at least some of these issues are things that you can relate to. maybe you have a old and inefficient furnace and you're always constantly having to run it to stay warm in the winter. That drives your energy bills up. Or maybe your furnace works fine, but your house is still cold and you have high energy bills because you have a lot of drafts. And places where air can get in are also places where pests can get in. And that can lead to health issues, or the pests can, chew wires and lead to exposed wiring, which is a safety concern. And lack of ventilation can lead to moisture and condensation. All these things are really connected. And so we try to take a whole house approach here and think of your home as a system. And so in order for your home to be at its most efficient, all the pieces should be, working together and operating effectively. So for example, if you notice your house is really cold all the time during the winter, your first instinct might be to say, oh, my furnace doesn't work well, I'm going to replace my furnace. But if you do that without thinking of the entire home, it could be that your furnace is fine. And again, you have leaky ducts or not enough insulation. And so you might, pay for this fancy new furnace, and it won't have a huge impact if you're not thinking of the building as a system. And then I also want to note as I go forward that just because the systems in your home are all interconnected, that doesn't mean you have to do everything all at once. It's generally considered this kind of an optimal loading order is what we call it, of the agreed upon best order to do these upgrades. Usually starts with addressing any urgent health, safety, or structural concerns. And then the next thing would be working on the building envelope. So things like windows, insulation, air sealing, before you get into the larger appliances like your heater and water heater. However, all these things are good things to do, and don't get paralyzed by the amount of work that might be needed in your home. Really just start with anything you can and, work your way through the list kind of one by one. Okay, so getting on to some actual things in the home. One big one that really affects every home, whether it's single family, multifamily, is air leakage. And so basically all over your house, anywhere where two materials meet. So, where floor meets a ceiling, where there's light fixtures, electrical outlets around window and door frames, those are all places where air can get in and get out of your home. And there's enough of these small cracks and openings that actually in the average home, if you add them all together, they'd be the size of a large hula hoop. So if you can imagine, in your living room where you have your TV, instead, if that was just a gaping hole to the outside, you can imagine that on a cold day when you're running your furnace, you're going to be losing a lot of that warm air and really wasting a lot of that energy. And this also means that during wildfire smoke, or if you live in an area with polluted outdoor air, those are all places where pollution can come in from the outside and enter your home. And so there's a pretty simple solution to this. It's basically sealing all of those little cracks. And so you can test this with what's called a blower door test, where they close all the windows and doors in your house, and then basically have a fan, they pump air into the home, and then measure how fast the air leaves, and they can find where all those cracks are. And so around window and door frames, it might look like, caulking around the frame. It could be door, blinking on the phrase, but little rubber things that go on the bottom of the doors, and just sealing up other cracks. This is something that if you are a renter, I would encourage you to get your landlord's approval before doing any of this, but these are things that I would assume that in a lot of rental situations, you could do some of the sealing on your own. You might not be able to do everything, but you could at least start, noticing if there's any big areas where you have drafts coming in, and sealing those up. And this is usually pretty affordable, and it really can have a big impact on energy efficiency. This is one that might be a little bit more relevant for the Bay Area folks on the call, but we all know about how big of an issue wildfire smoke has been. For anyone who's not from the Bay Area who's on this call, you probably heard about this, but this is what our sky looked like last September on one day during the wildfires. The sky was literally orange all day, and the air quality was up, above 300 AQI, and anything over 100 is usually considered unhealthy. So this is a really big issue. It's only getting worse every year. It affects, everyone, no matter where you live. This is becoming a big issue. And there's a few different things you can do. I would say the most important thing is just when the outdoor air is above 50 AQI or so, close your windows and your doors. That'll keep most of the pollution from coming in. It's also important to just monitor, be aware of what the AQI is outside. This is my favorite source for that, fire.airnow.gov. We can put that in the chat. It pulls together a bunch of different sources of air quality readings. And so just be aware when the outdoor air is unhealthy and, seal up. That's the number one thing you can do. If you have AC or if you're in the car, make sure to circulate the air, just reuse the air instead of pulling in outside air. If you have AC or a whole house fan in your home, make sure to replace your filters regularly. And then finally, this came up, but air purifiers, they do cost a little bit, but I think it's a really good investment. This is the brand I actually just got a few months ago. Me and my two roommates went in on it. It was about $200. It wasn't cheap, but it really has made an impact. If you can afford it, I would recommend that. There's another option where you can make your own with a box fan and a HEPA filter. You basically tape it to the back of the fan and then pull air through that filter using the fan. And so there's linked here is a short video on how you can make your own with that. And then finally, just because what you want to do is close your windows and your doors when it's smoky outside. That also means air inside can't leave as easily. So if you have a gas stove, maybe avoid using your gas stove during these wildfire smoke days. Okay, and then another issue that is pretty common is, I guess these are a few different issues in one, but moisture, allergens, and pests. So you can see here in these pictures, like basically anywhere you have furniture up against the wall where there might not be a lot of airflow, that's all a place where moisture can accumulate and lead to mold and mildew, which can, again, lead to allergies or asthma or other issues. This especially can happen in homes that have poor insulation, where the walls might get really cold, like in the winter, and then water condenses on them. If you ever noticed that, I lived in an apartment once where whenever it got below about 50 degrees, our walls would all just get like sweaty and wet. It was really gross. And so another reason why insulation is important. And so, I know this sounds counterintuitive because I was just talking about how you want to seal up your home and keep air from coming in, but it's also important to ventilate. And basically you want to choose the air that's coming into your home, and let the good air in and the bad air out. And so you want to have enough airflow to avoid, the moisture building up like this. But you want to be filtering the air that's coming in and choosing the air that's coming in. And so that's what something like an air purifier can help with, and an air sealing. It can help you, make sure that only the air that's good is coming in, but you're still getting enough ventilation to avoid moisture issues. And then also in places like bathrooms, you want to make sure you have a working vent fan. This poor person right here, it looks like their vent is just going, instead of leading to the outside, it's just going directly into their attic. And what that means is their attic is now warm and moist and creating a perfect environment for pests to come in. That's exactly the type of home that rats and other pests love. And so you want to make sure you're venting to the outdoors. And then also when I was talking about air sealing, any cracks that are, above the size of a coin are areas where pests could squeeze through and come in. And so, all these things are interconnected. If you're starting to see that, and again, they can all cause health issues and other just gross. You just don't want pests in your home for a number of reasons. So there's a few solutions to this. Again, the main one is just anywhere you have a lot of moisture or combustion happening, you want to make sure you have proper ventilation, and that ventilation is going to the outdoors. Anywhere where you have a lot of air coming in to the home, you want to make sure you have a filter that can, keep out pollutants. And then this is especially a big thing in the Bay Area, where a lot of homes are built on top of a dirt crawl space. And that's an area where a lot of moisture and pests can enter the home. And so this is what's called vapor sealing. It's basically a thin layer of plastic that keeps the moisture in the dirt and keeps that moisture from entering your home. If your house gets too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, the likely cause is lack of insulation. There's a few things that can happen. Most homes start with insulation, but it wears down over time. And so if you have an older home, it could just be that the insulation, has worn out and it'll start to drip down like this. Or a lot of homes, that were built cheaply just simply don't have insulation in the first place. And again, this can also lead to moisture issues, like I mentioned. And so, again, pretty simple. You can add insulation to your attic and walls as well as your floors. There's a few different types. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we like to say that a lot of our research finds that attic insulation is the #1 most cost-effective upgrade you can do to your home in terms of it's relatively inexpensive to add, but it can have a huge impact on your energy bill. It can lower it by, really significantly, because the attic is where the most heat enters and leaves the home. So again, if you own your home, if you don't have insulation, I highly recommend starting with this and air sealing as the 2 things that you do first. And if you live in a smaller rental unit that does have an attic, this is something that you can recommend to your landlord. That is something that's relatively inexpensive for them to do. It will really benefit you, and it'll also benefit them by lowering bills and just improving the value of the home. And then this is something that people don't think a lot, but if you have a central furnace or AC system that gets distributed through air ducts, the average duct system leaks about 30%, which means if you're running your furnace, 30% of that energy that you're paying for, that warm air, is just going right out into your attic or your crawl space or somewhere where it's not actually helping you. So that means, every dollar you're spending on your energy bill, 30% of that is getting wasted. And so this is a big thing. You want to make sure that your ducts are well sealed. We have a joke that we like to say that duct tape is good for fixing everything except for your ducts. And that's mostly because the ducts get really warm. And so this adhesive just wears off and then it'll fall off like this. What you see in this middle picture is something where there's the metal duct surrounded by insulation and there's a small leak. And so as air is going through the duct, it's actually pulling in outside air from the garage or wherever this is. And then that insulation is acting as an air filter. And so that's letting dust and other pollution get into your duct system and as well as little pieces of insulation fiber get in, and then they're just getting distributed all over your house. And then over here, again, this poor person, their duct is just completely disconnected, which means 100% of the air that they're, using for the furnace is just going straight into the attic and not into anywhere where it's useful to them. And so again, the solution to this is relatively straightforward. If you do own your home, this is something that I recommend having a contractor come out and just inspect them. They'll be able to see any of these issues on that last slide if you're receiving them. It might be as simple as just adding an extra layer and sealing some of the cracks. In really bad cases, you might replace the whole system. But again, this is really important to do before you think about replacing your furnace to ensure that you're getting a properly sized unit that's actually going to be effective. And then now some of the big ones, which is gas burning appliances. And this is really what can have a lot of an impact on both, climate and air quality inside your home. So this is in the West Coast of the US. The average home, over 50% of the end energy use goes to either space heating or water heating. And most homes in this area heat their air and their water using natural gas rather than electricity. And so, as we know, it's a fossil fuel. It's a major contributor to climate change. And also natural gas just emits a lot of dangerous chemicals and byproducts that can impact your health. And so what we want to do is we want to transition all of these gas burning big dirty appliances into cleaner all electric units. And so it's what we call decarbonization. I always find this a helpful kind of chart to show people that when we talk about decarbonizing our homes and decarbonizing our energy system, there's 3 main legs to that stool. The first is energy efficiency. So all the things I was just talking about, insulation, air sealing, things like that. The second is ensuring that all of our electricity is coming from renewable and clean sources. If you live in Alameda County, you can actually opt up to a payment plan where 100% of your electricity is coming from renewable sources. That's through East Bay Community Energy, which is our local power provider here. And then the third step, once everything is efficient and all of our power is clean, then let's move everything to that clean power. Because natural gas, it will never be 100% clean, whereas electricity, you know, we can make that electricity 100% clean. And so this is kind of the three-legged stool that we like to think about of efficiency, clean generation, and then electrification are the three things that need to happen to have a fully carbon-free home. And there's also, I know we've touched on this a few times now, but it's really important. I really want to stress this of the non-climate benefits of an all-electric home. The main one and the first one here is just health. Natural gas, burning that inside your home, it releases not 100% of those gas molecules will actually burn, and not 100% of them will get vented out. And so that means things like carbon monoxide, nitrous dioxide, and formaldehyde are entering your home, and you are breathing those in. Not great. And then safety is another big issue. I grew up in San Mateo County, which is on the peninsula. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a major explosion from a gas line breaking and exploding and destroyed a few homes. I think a few people were killed. And so it's not a super likely thing. I hope I don't want to scare anyone, but it is a real risk that gas is combustible and can burn if there's something happens, if there's an earthquake. And then also with gas stove, if you have kids in your home, they can always burn themselves in the gas. Electric is a lot harder to burn yourself. I'll talk about comfort a little bit about how heat pumps provide dual heating and cooling. Electric appliances are also a lot quieter and reduce noise pollution. And then finally, they're also just a lot more efficient. And if you are in a position to pair full electrification with adding solar panels and battery storage to your home, basically you are completely eliminating all of your utility bills or your energy bills in that way. So when we talk about all electric appliances, usually what we're referring to is heat pump technology. If we were in person right now, I kind of ask everyone to raise your hand if they already had a heat pump. That's not going to work. But basically everyone should have their hand raised, because if you have a refrigerator in your home, you essentially have a heat pump. That's kind of the easiest way I can think to explain these. How a refrigerator works is it has a fan. It's a big box, has a fan that blows the air out. It blows that air over some coils that have refrigerant in them that absorb all the heat in that air, and then the cool air goes back into the box, and the warm air goes behind. That's why if you reach behind your refrigerator, it's always kind of warm. So a heat pump water heater essentially works like that, but in reverse. You have it in your garage or somewhere like that. It has this fan condenser unit at the top that blows air in. It runs that over some coils with refrigerant. Those absorb all of the heat, transfer that heat to the water, and then cool air comes out the other way. So it's also has the added benefit of keeping your garage cool. And the really cool things about these is instead of creating heat like when you burn gas, heat pumps simply just move heat from one place to the other. And they're 300 to 400% efficient, which doesn't really sound possible, but essentially means for every 1 unit of electricity that you're using, you're putting 3 to 4 units of heat into your water. So they're very efficient. And another cool thing is they can connect to the grid and help with demand response. So if you live in Alameda County, there's a new thing called time of use rates, where electricity costs more during the high demand times of 4 to 9 p.m. So what you can do with these, you can use the electricity when it's cheapest in, say, the morning, heat up your water, and then keep that water warm, and then you have a basically cheap supply of hot water, even when electricity is at its peak pricing. And then heat pump technology also works for space heating. And the really cool thing about these is you can basically flip a switch and they can work in reverse. And so they can provide both heating and cooling. It's kind of like an air conditioning system and furnace in one. And so these, again, are really great. They work in most climates, even when it's cool out. In California, it basically never gets so cold that this won't work. It's basically, will always be able to generate enough heat from the outdoor air in this kind of climate. They, again, are 300% efficient. So much, much more efficient than the standard gas furnace, and even more efficient than, you know, a standard electric furnace. And another cool thing is the flexibility here. So you can either have a central system, it works just like your standard central AC or furnace, except you just have this little outdoor unit. That's what, that's the actual heat pump. And then that connects to air handler that distributes the air around the house. You can also have a system where you have that outdoor unit, but then you have different lines going to different parts of the house. And so you can have, you know, one room at a different temperature than another room. And so again, that's more efficient, because then at night you only need to control the temperature in your bedroom, but you can, you know, turn the rest of the system off, and you're not paying to heat the entire home when you're only in one room. And then just the last solution I want to talk about here, this is one that always generates a lot of discussion, is induction cooktops. So I think we've already, you know, between Gina and me, explained why gas cooking is harmful to your health. It's a big contributor to asthma. And they're also just not very efficient. Gas, about, you know, the same thing. You're creating heat. So you're burning a flame, and then there's the flame, and then there's the pot, and like you're heating the air under the pot, and then that air is heating the pot. But a lot of that just slips around the side, and so they're really not very efficient. Only about 40% of the heat goes into your food. Whereas induction cooking is basically cooking with magnets. You use an electromagnet that basically, it's kind of like a magnet that turns on and off really quickly. And that activates the electrons in the metal in your pan, and it turns your pan itself into the heating vehicle. And so again, these are like over twice as efficient. And they're really cool. It's a lot more precise and heats up a lot faster than gas. People have an aversion to electric cooking because they immediately think of these horrible electric coils from the 70s that I have kind of a more modern version of this currently in my current place, and it's not great. They stay too hot. They're hard to control. Induction is not that. Induction is a different thing, because it uses magnets. A lot of top chefs have actually started transitioning over to those because they do provide so much power and precision. And another really cool thing is that because it's only your pan getting hot, the surface of the stove doesn't get hot. So you can have it on full blast, put your hand right on the surface, and you wouldn't feel a thing. So again, if you have kids in the house, they're a lot safer in that respect as well. So that's all of the kind of common issues and solutions that I have covered. That's not a comprehensive list. There are some other, you know, things out there, and if anyone has an issue in their home that I didn't address, I would love to hear. You know, please share that in the chat, and maybe we can brainstorm on if there is a solution to that. I'm going to skim through this really quickly, some programs and resources, just because not everyone on the call is in the Bay Area, and these are all kind of local resources, but I just want to highlight a couple of them really quickly for those who are in Alameda County or elsewhere in the Bay Area. The first is Home Energy Score. This is a service that Bayron offers. It's a home assessment. So you'd have an assessor come out and basically look at all the things I just talked about. They would look at your water heater, your furnace. They'd look at how much insulation you have, all those types of things, and give you a score from 1 to 10. It's kind of like a miles per gallon sticker for your home. And then they would also provide you with a report with personalized recommendations. And so if you listen to this whole presentation and said, oh, I might have some of those issues, but I'm not really sure where to start or how to figure that out, this is a really great tool to just get started and understand a little bit more about what some of the potential issues are in your home. So you can go to this link here to find out how to get started. This is Bayron's program for single family homes. So if you do own a 1 to 4 unit home in the Bay Area, you can get up to $5,000 in rebates for making many of the changes that I talked about here. Not going to spend too much time, but happy to refer people to more information if you are interested in taking advantage of some of those rebates. And then for anyone in the Bay Area, kind of all of the slides in this program section, this is the one that you should really remember. This is a really cool tool that Bayron offers. It's called the Home Energy Advisor. It's essentially a free call line You can call them and ask for advice on any issue related to energy use in your home. So if you just have an issue and don't really know what's causing it, they can maybe help you diagnose this. They can help explain to you various solutions. They can help connect you with contractors. And there's a lot of programs that I'm not going to cover here around energy bill assistance or things like that. They can also refer you to those programs. They don't earn a commission. It's totally there just to help support you. And so if you have any questions at all, or you want to get started, I highly, highly encourage you to write down this number and get in touch with the home energy advisor. And this is available for renters. Again, they might not be able to connect you with quite as many resources, but if you are a renter, they can help provide some tools that are available to you as well. And then this is our program for multifamily homes. For any CLT folks on the line, this could be relevant. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but essentially we provide free technical assistance and $750 per unit in rebates for multifamily properties to make efficiency upgrades. And so again, I'm happy to talk to anyone who either works with CLT or otherwise owns or manages multifamily property, or if you're a renter and you think your property could be a good fit, you can give me a call and we can help strategize, how to talk to your landlord about this. I'm just going to skim through these really quick. Rising Sun is a local nonprofit. They have a greenhouse call program that can do a lot of this assessment for your home, and then provide things like LEDs and smart power strips that can help lower your energy bill. They also employ local youth from disadvantaged communities and train them into these careers. So it's a really great service. This is available even if you are a renter in an apartment building. You can still participate and get some of these this toolkit. And then finally, again, sorry, I'm skipping through these really fast, but East Bay Community Energy, if you live in Alameda County, this is now your default power provider. They're a public agency, nonprofit public agency. Basically how it works is they purchase or generate the electricity using largely renewable sources, and then deliver it to you using the existing PG&E infrastructure. And so that's why you still get a bill from PG&E, even though EVC is the one procuring your power. So it leads to a lot more community control, lower rates because they are nonprofit and public, and then also more flexibility. And so you have your default option, which is a little bit cleaner than PG&E is offering, or you can upgrade to a carbon-free or 100% renewable rate plan. And so again, if you're a renter, this is something you can do if you want to, have an impact on reducing the amount of kind of your carbon footprint. This is a good and easy way. It takes 5 minutes and it only costs a few dollars a month to upgrade. So this is a really good way to just get started and make a small difference. They also have a program that provides low rates for solar panels and battery storage. If you own a home or multifamily property, I would encourage you to look into this. And then there's a few other solar programs here that are a mix of general discount programs that are available to anyone, or things like grid alternatives and the SOMA program, which are more specific to low-income families and affordable multifamily properties. So sorry, I know I skimmed through that last part quickly. I didn't want to spend too long on things that aren't relevant to everyone. But that's all I have. Thanks so much, Sarah and Diana, for the time. I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions. It looks like there's a lot going on in the chat, which I have not been following.
It's all right. And Chris, you can go ahead and stop sharing the screen. Yeah. Thank you so much. A lot of the questions that got asked were answered throughout by Vina and Diana. Thank you guys so much for all the expertise that you're able to share. I think there was one question from Don, though, that didn't fully get addressed. Yeah, I've been told that you need a secondary heating source if the temperature falls below 25 degrees, but would it help to get 2 heat pumps and only turn on the second one when it gets that cold? I don't know if you know the answer to that, Chris.
don't quote me on this. I think that probably wouldn't be the best solution. It might help, but heat pumps are not super cheap at the moment. The price is continually coming down. But if you live in a climate where it frequently gets that cold, there are more units coming onto the heat pump models coming onto the market that do work in those really low temperatures. But if you live in a climate that cold, it's probably smarter just to keep a secondary gas heater or propane heater, and just only use it a few times a year when it comes into need, until those other models become affordable that work in really low temperatures. But anywhere in California or in the Bay Area at least, basically any heat pump it doesn't get cold enough for heat pumps to not work. And Vina, I saw you nodding. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that.
No, you covered it perfectly.
Great. Are there any more questions? I know that this was a lot of information.
Sorry, I know that was a lot. I was trying to get through it all. Yeah, I'll share this, or I think Sarah, you can send the slides out. So yeah. all the programs I mentioned, they all have links. So the PDF we send out, you can just click on the link and see those.
Yeah, and I know that, in discussions with residents at NCLT, a lot of questions were around, and it relates to the programs that Chris brought up, like how do we afford these things? Because they can be very cost prohibitive. So I think the programs are actually going to be really important for people to explore, to see what's available for them. And feel free to reach out with any questions that folks have if you're going through things and you're just not sure what makes sense.
Yeah. And the programs are never set in stone. Bayron is always kind of rethinking who we're serving and whether programs are being effective. So again, we're always open to feedback.
I think Dawn had a question in the chat. Do you have to put holes in the walls in order to add insulation? I can comment briefly on this, and Diana, Chris, or others might have more to add. I'd say it depends on the type of insulation you're adding. So like Chris mentioned attic insulation, which you don't need to do any holes in the walls to add that. And the roof insulation, the foundation insulation, there's a number of types of insulation you can add without having to kind of do major disruptions, in the building shell. I'd say adding wall insulation, you might have to do that if you're adding it from the interior. There's also options to add exterior insulation where you don't need to put any holes in the walls.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. The wall insulation, how I've seen it done a lot, they'll drill a small hole in the wall like this big, and then you basically have a hose that sprays the insulation into the wall and fills that cavity, and then it's just a really easy, really small hole to fill with drywall. So that one is a little bit more intrusive. That's a lot of times I'll recommend doing that, when you're already doing some other project to your home. It's usually a good time to do wall insulation. But attic insulation, yeah, it's much easier. You can kind of do it anytime, and it's not very intrusive.
And Don, you must be from a cold climate. One more question. Does any type of heating underneath the floor require a radiator?
I'm not as familiar with radiant floor heating because it's not really common in California.
Yeah, maybe I can comment a little bit more on that. You don't need, so I guess radiant floor heating can be really efficient, and it's just you tie it into an electrical source, but you don't really need any additional equipment if your I guess your electrical load can handle the extra capacity.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you had like a current radiant or heating system with, with a boiler, you could replace that boiler with a heat pump, like a heat pump water heater kind of, and still use a heat pump, just plugging that into that system. I would guess that's possible, but that's something to ask a contractor.
Yeah, and there's actually another question from Don about finding energy efficiency contractors. Chris, do you know of any ways to search for people who specialize in that?
If you're in the Bay Area, here I'll put a link in the chat. So actually for that Bay Run Home Plus program that I mentioned, the one for single family homes, we actually do ask that you go through a contractor that's enrolled in our program. That way they're pre-vetted and they can kind of handle all the rebate paperwork on your behalf. And so here's the link for that. These are, again, all qualified pre-vetted contractors in the Bay Area that do a lot of this work. Another resource is the Switch is On. That's I think it's a statewide campaign that focuses on electrification, and they also have a contractor list. And so I think that's statewide. If you're outside of California, I don't know too much about where you would find these. Find a list, sorry.
And then there's another really good question from Don. Is ductless heating cooling systems ever more efficient than ducted heating and cooling systems?
I'm not completely sure. I think it would probably depend on the home, how leaky your ducts are. And then also, like I mentioned, ductless can be more efficient if you use it that way, in that you can only, heat or cool the rooms that you're using. So I would guess they tend to be a little bit more efficient, but I actually haven't seen specific data around that.
Yeah, and then each type of equipment will have their efficiency ratings. So you can look at the SEER, SEER for cooling, or sometimes EER, or the HSPF for heating efficiency. And I can put those acronyms in the chat. So a higher rating is more efficient.
And then there's another question from Don, and then I'm gonna lead us to a closing exercise. Is forced air usually more efficient than boiler/radiator systems?
I'm actually not sure on that. Or Diana, I don't know if you know.
I'm not sure either. That's a good question.
That is a really good question. I can try to look into that.
I think
it might be another situation where it just depends on the home.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it just depends on how it's used, and there are a lot of ways that really efficient systems don't get utilized properly, so that you don't get all the benefits of their efficiency. So it's really about the home, and also how it's being used and how it's been maintained.
Thanks, Diana. And Chris and Vina. This is not my area of expertise at all. So I have learned a lot from today's workshop, and just being able to soak in presentations beforehand. So thank you guys so much. And we just wanted to close. Thank you everyone for joining us today, with a brief discussion about, are there any immediate solutions that were brought up today that you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to move forward on this in the next few months or the next year? Because I know this can feel really overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. But are there any immediate solutions or programs that, after today, you're going to start to look into? What makes the most sense for your home space or your community space right now? Jenny's going to buy an air purifier this winter for next summer. I know I'm going to be going around and looking at seams and seeing places where we can seal up. That's an easy, low cost thing to do.
I am
Something that I've heard
definitely
you can
turning
do.
on. Oh, sorry.
No,
I
no,
was,
go-
gonna s- I was
ahead.
saying, I'm turning on my exhaust fan every single time I cook, especially with my gas stove.
Yeah, I even have an electric stove and I still use it every time. Especially if if you're cooking with oils and the oil can get vaporized, that can be air pollution. Sarah, you were mentioning looking at all the cracks. There's a kind of trick I've heard before. I haven't really tried this myself, but if you hold like a match or or light a little skewer on fire, and then hold it up to around doors and windows, you can kind of see the smoke and see the flame move wherever there's a leak. So that's a good way to trace it.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful.
Or like incense might work well, because then you can actually see the smoke blowing. And it makes your house smell good.
Is there anyone that wants to lift up even challenges that you see with even moving forward on any of this stuff? Money. Yep. Money is such a challenge. Chris, for folks that are really concerned about being able to afford things, where would you start?
I would start with, you can all, a good place to start, just like kind of free things, is that Rising Sun program. Start just by changing your light bulbs and low flow shower heads, things like that. Again, you can get some of those for free from different services. If you kind of own your home and actually want to have a bigger impact, like I said, attic insulation is, you get a lot of bang for your buck with attic insulation and air sealing.
And then Chris, we actually had a lot of comments about recycling, and I put some resources for stop waste, waste reduction in the chat, and I'll actually drop that back in. But do you have any other recommendations or resources for encouraging people to recycle or reducing waste in your home?
Not specifically, but yes, just visit the Stop Waste website, and there's a lot of really cool tips and resources available. And if anyone has specific questions, you can reach out to me and I can try to refer you to someone else in my agency who might have more expertise in that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Just want to stress, we will be sending out all of the slides and also the recording to everyone who registered. So if you registered, your email was in there, you got information to get on this call, then you will be getting all the information. So that'll probably be going out sometime on Monday or Tuesday. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Chris or Vina, or Diana, if you have questions and are just trying to figure out where to start. And we really thank everyone for being part of this conversation today, for your care about the environment and your home. And thank you, Chris and Vina and Diana, for talking about steps that people can take in order to make changes that we need for ourselves individually and communities, and then just for a healthier planet. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday.
Thanks.